welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. I've decided to sit out in the open for a bit, thus the hushed tones. There are people at nearby benches, but it's just absurd hiding in the woods for the sake of whatever. Anyway, I popped down into the centre earlier this week, went into the food hall in the basement of the John Lewis on Oxford Street, their sort of flagship store. As I've often said before, it has always traditionally been a good place to find English sparkling, but it does seem like they're running their stocks down. It's ever more sad when I go in there. Perhaps I can show you a picture of they have some wines on the end of one aisle, but then there are also additional wines in the fridges which are not represented on the end of the aisle. So that end of the aisle there used to be absolutely teeming with all sorts of small independent ESW producers, and has sort of, yeah, it's verging a lot more on big mainstream producers. But they also have their own brand, Waitrose / John Lewis, and I've shown one of these before. This is Leckford Estate. They actually own this farm, I think it's a farm, which happens to have a vineyard, and I think they make some other produce there. And I believe if you're an employee, what do they call them, a partner of John Lewis / Waitrose, you can apply to do you'll traditionally used to be able to apply to do a sabbatical to go and work on the farm and possibly even tend the vines in the vineyard. I don't think they have their own winery there. Ridgeview do the actual vinification, I think. So they grow the grapes. Actual employees, partners, I should say, of John Lewis / Waitrose grow the grapes, and then Ridgeview do the vinification. This is very much a Waitrose wine. I don't think it has the grape breakdown on the bottom. It lists as Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier in that order. Oh, and I forgot to say, this is the 2021 vintage. I did check briefly, and I have covered another vintage of this previously, but I think it was a different one. So hopefully I'm not utterly repeating myself. Sorry, a bit slippy, so I'm doing this off screen. So that is what we have. Nice sort of pale gold colour, nice healthy stream of bubbles there. There was a bit of a mousse before, but that's dissipated while I've been faffing around with the bottle. I actually brought along an ice bucket again. I do have some icy water I'll pour in there in a minute, but currently it's just making do with that ice jacket thing. First nose there. Not a huge amount jumping out of the glass. I think I'm getting some sort of background of autolytic stuff, a bit of brioche sort of character. Yeah, subtle sort of French pastry brioche kind of thing. And if there's any fruit there, it's lemon and possibly even a bit of something like gooseberry, but it's a little bit faint. Maybe needs a bit of a swirl. Creamier post swirl. Yeah, more of that autolytic character, sort of custard buns. Is that a thing? It's subtle and it's sort of slightly green actually. I'm reminded a little bit of gooseberries. Gooseberry full, sort of creamy green fruit in some slightly creamy context. I mean, there probably is a bit of apple and lemon there as well, but I'm thinking mostly getting sort of Chardonnay-esque character and not so much from the Pinots. Nicer on the palate, bit of, I think there it's sort of green apple zing. Might be a little bit of subtle stone fruit character in with that little bit of peach. More of those creamy notes. If I had to guess, I would say possibly this has undergone malolactic fermentation. I could be wrong. It's not that searingly acidic, and there are some nice creamy notes, but I could just be being confused by the autolytic character there, that sort of brioche, almost custardy thing. I think I'm getting a sense of lactic acid there, a sort of nice yogurty tanginess. Yogurty sounds like a bad thing in the context of sparkling wine. It sounds like a fault, but yeah, it's got that sort of creaminess but tanginess to it, a bit like yogurt. I think that's lactic acid. It's definitely pleasant. I just sort of think I'm missing a bit on the nose there. Sort of greenish fruits, gooseberries maybe, possibly a bit of green apple, possibly a bit of lemon. slightly green lemon. But at the moment, not a lot else on the nose. You want to see the ridiculousness of the ice bucket carried here. I've actually had a bit of light dinner. Didn't bother filming that. But, some of those little pots of things you get in the fridges in supermarkets these days. One was little bits of sun-dried tomato and mozzarella balls. You don't need to know this. So yeah, still coming across, I would say, as a little bit green. I think it's not a huge amount of fruit character on the nose, and what there is a little bit green. And I wonder if this is a vintage problem. I don't know if I'd made much at the start about the fact this is 2021 and other English sparkling producers complained of 2021. Dermot Segru went to a multi-vintage that year, I think for the first time in the Trouble with Dreams series, and I don't think it was necessarily a great year in various parts of England. I feel as though perhaps Leckford Estate has suffered with that a little bit as well. And they've somewhat compensated for it by giving it some nice autolytic character. I like those brioche, creamy notes, all of that stuff. The creaminess and the slight sort of pastry, bakery product, bakery section notes I like about this. But yeah, just the fruit character isn't really setting my world on fire. Like I say, a little bit green. On the palate, I don't notice that quite so much, actually. It's got a nice bit of zing. I guess the great thing about traditional method sparkling is that if there isn't a huge amount of sugar in the fruit, you can compensate for that somewhat with dosage. So the balance is, the sweet and sour balance on the palate is actually quite nice. Decent texture to that, and I like those creamy notes to it. But I think they were just starting from the point of not particularly great fruit. And I think the issue there was 2021, bit of a naff year. Not just English sparkling, it's a bad year for Burgundy as well, as I recall. So what can you do? Interesting to ponder that in the midst of this heat wave here in England in 2026. I'm guessing this will be quite a good year for English sparkling. Of course, we won't know the end result for another 3-4 years from now, but yeah. So it's okay. I should say this was on special offer. That's part of the reason I chose that. I was being a bit mean. They actually had 3 different wines from Leckford Estate in the John Lewis Food Hall, Oxford Street, central London. And one of them did sound a bit more appealing, but it was also 10 quid more. I was feeling mean-spirited, so mean was just mean. I was feeling mean, so I went for the cheapest one, 25 quid. I mean, it's definitely nicer than not having any ESW here on the Heath at all. But it's not I wouldn't say this particular vintage from Leckford Estate is a shining example. They've made up for it somewhat in the winery. I think Ridgeview have done a good job of trying to salvage what is probably a little bit of a batch of underwhelming fruit. That is my take on this. That's probably it from me. Cheers.